Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1396. The topic is nutrition and the title is Unexplained Weight Gain. So we're going to go through quite a bit of stuff today. You're going to probably want to pause and write some things down. We're actually going to go through some medication names, which I will mispronounce all of them probably. But we're going to go through some stuff. We had a listener send in a question. They have been eating healthy and exercising a minimum of 5 days a week. Real quick, I have to say that eating healthy is completely scattered as to what that actually means. So people have different definitions of what eating healthy is. So we'll talk through that here in a second. But this person believes they're eating healthy, they're exercising a minimum of 5 days a week, and unfortunately, they've continued to gain weight over the past 3 months. They said significantly. They've gained 15 pounds in the last 3 months, and they really don't know how or why. They haven't, and they're very open-minded that they might be making a mistake in some kind, but they feel like they're very educated. They've looked into it. They do not know how they could be gaining 15 pounds because nothing in their food has changed. And nothing in the way they exercised changed. They just said they started exercising a little extra, maybe throwing in an extra day or two of cardio here or there, or maybe hitting the weights a little bit. So they had previously kind of been only working out maybe 3, maybe 4 days a week. But since they started feeling some weight gain, and this actually started 3 months before the last 3 months, so 6 months ago. 6 months ago, they noticed over the first 3 months that they gained about 8 to 10 pounds. They thought that's kind of awkward, kind of weird. I haven't done anything different. They started freaking out a little bit, started doing a little more cardio, got like hyper detailed in their food, but then still over the last 3 months, they gained another 15. So they've gained about 25 pounds in 6 months, which is very significant considering they have not been trying to do that. So people who even try to do that can't do that very well. So we want to go through some things that I would typically talk through with clients. Now, I have a master's in nutrition, health and phys ed certification, a bunch of other certifications, like a personal training certification through American College of Sports Medicine, corrective exercise specialist certification, other things as well. So I have some education, but I'm not a doctor, of course. So I am going to discuss medications because this is very helpful to know, and it raises your awareness so you can go talk to your doctor. But please don't make any changes based on things I say. Just take this and say, okay, I am now aware of this information. Let me go research more of this and talk to the professionals who do these things. So that's normally I don't really give those kind of like disclaimers, but I think this is a good one to do that. So what I would do is I would typically send and ask some questions. The initial questions would be, I would ask if they had made any changes to medication recently. And I'm going to go through 10 examples of medication that can cause weight gain. I would also ask them if they've gotten their thyroid and hormones checked, like their estrogen, testosterone checked recently. And if they have, I'd want to see the numbers. I'd also ask them if they've made any changes to their nutrition or training recently. So that would be a good question. And then I would ask them, basically when I see their nutrition, I would ask, like, have you made any changes or not, yes or no? And then also, can you give me a rundown of kind of what you eat? Or in a lot of these cases, when I get emails like this, I've worked with I don't even know, 100 plus clients like this over the years, where they're trying to figure out what's going on. Nobody's giving them any attention. They get a half-ass answer from, a doctor every 3 months, and it's just nothing is fast, nothing is efficient. So they tend to reach out because they know a friend of a friend who works with me. So I've worked with people in this scenario before, and I'll tell you, like, this is all the stuff we do and what we go through. So one of the things is they're probably, by this point I talk to them, they're tracking their food a lot. So they're very aware of what they're eating because they're freaking out because they don't want it to be too much or something happening because of it. So I usually ask them for the nutrition tracking information. So if they've been using like MyFitnessPal, I'm like, what's your login and password? I'll get in there and see what foods you're eating. One of the things I look at when I look at foods is, how much is their sugar intake? Are they eating dairy? Are they eating gluten? Are there things that we can eliminate or try to avoid that are common kind of allergies, like food allergies. So that way, if I eliminate them and we see a reduction in body weight, we know that maybe part of the issue is irritational, like digestive inflammation. So these are all the things we go through. The first thing here is looking at medication. There's a lot of medications that can cause initial weight gain when you first start taking them. Most of them normalize out, so you should definitely not be seeing continual weight gain over 6 months. Most of them within the first 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, you see a little bit of a jump, but then everything kind of normalizes out from there. So I'm going to go through the common ones, but there's also, random cases where maybe something else is a little different. Insulin, for example, is, a big one. If people are diagnosed with diabetes, they start taking insulin. It can promote weight gain because it helps your body absorb more glucose from your bloodstream. So glucose is good. It's an important thing. Our body uses it for energy. But if you've been eating, an X amount of sugar, now all of a sudden your body's absorbing more of that. It can be possibly converted over to body fat. So sugars need to be controlled when somebody is diabetic and taking insulin. I think that feels like it's common sense, but it's a good thing to mention. There's also like a category or another class of kind of diabetic medication. I think it's sulfonylureas. It's a weird category, but dimecron and glinase are medications that would be in this kind of class of diabetic medication, and they do cause issues. So they promote, not issues, not in a bad way, but they can cause weight gain. They stimulate basically the pancreas to release insulin. And again, more insulin in the bloodstream pushes more sugar into your cells. However, if that's not controlled by ensuring you're not eating excessive sugars, then it can cause weight gain. Now, there are diabetic medications like metformin that are kind of more considered kind of neutral in this response. So they might have a lessened effect with weight gain. So this is where I was talking about, if you're taking any of the things that I say, this could be a problem, don't just stop taking it. You needed it for a reason. Just go talk to your doctor and ask them if there's a different type of, a different class of medication or a different way to reach the same end result, but with a different type of medication. So another one we have is tricyclic antidepressants, and that would be Eleviev, Selinor, and Pomalor. I don't know how to pronounce these drug names, but hopefully I'm getting close enough. These drugs actually do increase appetite. So if you're on them, don't just stop taking them. You can't just stop antidepressants cold turkey. That's not going to help. But you can maybe make some switches. There's different classes of antidepressants like Wellbutrin, Cymbalta, and Prozac, which tend to have less of a connection with weight gain. You can also look at oral corticosteroids. If you started taking prednisone, maybe you had asthma, arthritis, back pain. Those are common reasons why somebody might take prednisone. And prednisone can increase appetite, can cause fluid retention. So it's definitely something you want to kind of be aware of. But typically, prednisone is prescribed for a short period of time. You're not going to be told to live with prednisone. If you're having to take it for the long term, then you really have to be diligent about exercise and diet to make sure that you can control the effects that prednisone has. Another category is antihistamines. So weight gain can be associated with an uptake of the use of Zyrtec, Allegra, Clarinex. And why? It's because antihistamine it helps in part to turn off hunger signals. And if you're taking an antihistamine, you're basically then reducing the ability for your body to feel full. Now, there's many other mechanics of how the body feels full, but this is a contributable concept and something you want to be aware of. Now, there are nasal sprays like Flonase. My wife takes Flonase, and that helps towards allergy control, but it doesn't have the association with the hunger effect. Now, beta blockers, they're commonly used to treat high blood pressure, and there are ones that are kind of more related to weight gain that seem to cause more weight gain. Tenormin, sorry, and then Lopressor. I don't know how to pronounce this stuff, but getting close enough. Those things, beta blockers can basically make you feel tired. especially when you first start taking them. So it slows down your heart rate, kind of makes you just feel kind of worn out and fatigued, and that's going to lower your exercise tolerance, like your physical movement tolerance. Then that's going to make you just be more likely to stay sedentary. So that's going to be how beta blockers have that effect. Now, the rest of these things are not as common, but epilepsy medication can have an effect. And then there's what's called SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and that's like another type of like category of like antidepressants, and that can basically it increases like serotonin in the brain, and like Lexapro, Paxil, Zoloft are kind of categories of those, and they may cause like appetite increase. So you just have to make sure you're on proper kind of dietary guidelines, kind of checking what you're eating. So if you just started some of those and you haven't been watching what you're eating, you may have been starting to eat more and not even realize it. Then there's another category called MAOIs. MAOIs, yeah, and it's monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which treats depression by blocking like a brain enzyme that's kind of connected with mood balancing, and that would be like serotonin, dopamine, but it may be used also to reduce migraines. So some people might have taken this to reduce migraines, not because of depressional issues, and that can cause a stimulus of appetite. And Nardil is a supplement that falls into this category. Then you also have antipsychotics, which can be used to treat, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Now, there's one like Zyprexa, which is associated with kind of like the highest association with weight gain. And basically, these drugs, unfortunately, they start to impair glucose function. They increase cholesterol and triglycerides, and it can really kind of have kind of a little bit of a, kind of detrimental effect there on health. But there are other variations, Latuda and, I don't know how to pronounce this one, Geodon, Geodon. Those ones tend to be less associated with the negative metabolic effects. Now, I just went through a lot of stuff that I hope was somewhat interesting, but as I said, this is all ridiculous fast stuff that like I knew of most of these. I had to look up some of the names. I didn't know what the more common like current drug names are for these categories. But the ones I run into sometimes, like insulin, usually if somebody's taking insulin, they're already aware that they need to control sugar intake. So that's not usually too big of a surprise there. But antidepressants, prednisone, antihistamines, beta blockers, those will all sometimes catch people off guard, and they'll see a weight increase associated with those uses. Now, if you're taking any of those things, you probably need it, so don't get rid of it. You would just want to be more crystal clear in what your nutritional guidelines are, make sure you're exercising, talk to your doctor if you're having a really significant effect. Maybe they can get you a different classification of a drug that does the same thing. But those are going to be things we look into is medications. Have we changed any medication recently? And that might be associated with any unexplained weight gain. The other thing we want to look to do is look up our hormones. So we want to make sure that our thyroid is within healthy range. Make sure your estrogen, testosterones are within healthy ranges. Now, estrogen, testosterone is way more challenging because the acceptable healthy range is not the optimal range. There's a big difference when it comes to hormones about what's like acceptable in the sense that it's normal for a human being versus what's optimal, what's best for a human being. The people I do help with blood work stuff, we tend to push for all things to be optimal. We don't like, it's like if I have a testosterone level of an 80-year-old guy, like the doctor's gonna be like, well, that's normal. And I'm like, I'm not 80, buddy. So that's not normal to me. So that's gonna be something I do not accept as an answer. Same thing with thyroid. If you're later in life, whatever that means to you, but your thyroid is still within normal range, but it's on the crappy end of the range, don't live there. Get a little bit of help, figure out some stuff, what you can do, and get more to the optimal range. So there's a lot of supplements now that The side effects are very minimal. And often, if you're out of range, the effects of being out of range are worse than the side effects of stuff that will put you in range. So it is better to have your hormones checked up. If you haven't checked them in the last year, it'd probably be a good idea to do that. If you are having, kind of like body fat issues and like low energy, and you're just like, man, what the hell? I try to stay active, I try to do this, and I'm always worn out, and I like have this extra pudge around me. Get your hormones checked, okay? Then, as I said, one of the questions I would ask about new style of training, if you started doing resistance loaded, like externally loaded training, where you're doing like dumbbells, barbells, weights, and things, you might be building muscle tissue. So if you haven't exercised regularly, especially with an external weight loads, meaning you're like beyond just body weight stuff, if you're starting to add resistance, you could be just building muscle tissue. Now, is that going to explain 25 pounds in 6 months? No, it's not. But if you've gained, say you started an exercise program, you started at lifting weights a little bit, and you've gained 5 pounds in the last, 4 weeks, don't freak out too much right away. Yeah, just wait and see another 4 weeks and see if your body composition, like the way you looks a little nicer. Maybe that 5 pounds has only gained 1 pound in the following 4 weeks. So over 8 weeks, you might have only gained 6. And then in the next 4 weeks, maybe you don't gain anything. So it just might be an initial response of your muscles trying to fill up with glycogen, adding a little bit of muscle tissue. So I've had people gain, like I had one woman, she gained 7 pounds but went down 2 pant sizes. And that was after, I think, 2 months. And she said, oh my gosh, if I would have weighed myself, halfway through this, I'd have fired you. And I was like, well, what the hell? Why would you fire me? It's like, I told you this was going to happen. So it's funny in the sense that she gained 7 pounds, but she looks much better, way better body composition, more confident, had to get two size smaller clothes. So don't let the scale, be the end all of what your progress is. Make sure you know that as you build muscle, you could be also just changing your composition, and you might actually be looking better, even if you're gaining a little bit of weight. Okay. Now, the next thing we look for is nutrition basics. If the person isn't tracking their food at all, then we definitely have to start paying attention to that. That's helpful. So I would look and see, okay, are they controlling their calorie intake, protein intake? Are they having enough protein? Are they distributing that throughout the day? Or are they under eating during the day and overeating at night? That'll cause weight gain if that's a new habit for you. So now that we're switching over, some people are going back to school. Kids are going back to school, teachers are going back to school, parents are having to change maybe their schedules because now the kids are in school. If you change schedules and all of a sudden you change when and how much you eat, you're going to change your body weight. So you have to make sure that the basics of nutrition are controlled, and that will help you kind of regulate if you have any unexplained weight gain. Then, if you're doing everything, the next stages we get into, the kind of the nitty-gritty stuff, is kind of tracking accuracy. So if you say you're tracking your calories and your macros, we want to find out if we're actually being accurate. So I'll send people videos on YouTube on how to actually measure foods. I have them send me a couple photos. So if somebody's like, well, I had 6 ounces of chicken and 200 grams of carbs for lunch, and then they send me a photo, and I'm like, holy hell, what is this? So I know portion sizes when I see them. This is what I do all day. So I can tell somebody immediately whether their portions are matching what they say. So sometimes, like I've had people where, we might get in a conversation. I'm like, hey, I need you to have 50 grams of carbs at lunch. And what I mean is I want them to eat a food that provides them 50 grams of carbohydrates. Not that I want them to pick a food that is carb-based and only eat 50 grams of it. So I don't want them to weigh out 50 grams of white potato and eat only that. So what I meant was get 50 grams of carbohydrates from white potatoes. So you would eat however the hell much white potatoes you need to eat to get 50 grams of carbohydrates. So sometimes there's misunderstandings like that. I literally had a person argue with me one time that clear soda didn't have any calories because you could see through it. Good Lord. But it's those things happen. So we would want to look through what the person thinks they're doing versus what they're actually doing, make sure that's on track. Then we get into kind of food elimination, like I said, in case they have any allergies to the food. So we try to eliminate dairy, eliminate gluten. Those are usually the first two I go after. Gluten's usually number one to try to eliminate. But I go through, eliminate gluten and dairy with them, give them food alternatives, and then often we might see like a bloating reduction. Bathroom habits tend to feel more normalized. They might go down a couple pounds, and here what they were having issues with was, like, say, a gluten sensitivity. So that's something we look for. We might also switch up their protein and carb sources. So if they eat, say, a lot of chicken, we might switch the chicken out to beef, and see if that changes the way the body responds. We tend to just kind of say, what are you doing now? Let's shake that up a little bit. And all of these things tend to be enough to solve 99.9% of people's problems. Very rarely does the issue go beyond what I've just explained in this podcast today. So if you have any unexplained weight gain, maybe some of the things we mentioned today gave you an idea. Podcast 1232 is a nutrition podcast titled Start Here. That's a good one to check in on if you want to try to say, okay, I'm serious about my nutrition. I want to get control of that. I want to know what my numbers should be and where should I start? So literally the podcast is titled Start Here. So that's podcast 1232. If you have any other questions, just reach out or email us brutalirongym@gmail.com. As I said, I've done this for hundreds of people. It's very normal. Now, I feel for you because it's not normal for you if you're experiencing unexplained weight gain. That could be insanely frustrating, insanely demoralizing. So if you're having any issues, please reach out. Don't stay with that emotional stress. Let's get some answers to it, okay? So my email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. Cool. Well, I hope everybody, like, if you listen in on this, and maybe this isn't an issue for you, but hopefully it was just interesting to hear kind of what are things that we consider and look at. And if you think it's something that might help somebody consider sharing it on social media. Throwing it out there on social media is just a great way to reach more people. Maybe somebody but you don't know that they're struggling with this. Maybe this would be a great way to help them. So please throw it out there on social media. It's a great way to help people. Just the idea of the podcast is to help people live their healthiest and happiest lives. The more people that are aware of the podcast, then the more people that can work for it. So thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast. A podcast is well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every day. I really appreciate the financial help. I'm going to try to keep this podcast going for free and keep it every day as long as I can afford to. But it is nice, the patrons, the people who give financial donations, it does help make that less of a burden. So I appreciate it very, very much. I really love this opportunity to have the podcast, and I hope that people are finding benefit from it. Cool. Well, if you do want to give a donation, you can do so at our website at www.brutalirongym.com. We have options for a one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation. Anything that you give is just going to go right to those hosting costs, so I really appreciate it. Also, if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us in our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.